Right now, in a dry dock in Galveston, the Battleship Texas is sitting out of the water, and she is the only warship left on Earth that fought in both world wars. Not the only American one, the only one. The Texas is the last of them. Every other warship that fired in both of those wars is on the bottom, or was cut up, or exists as a piece of metal in a museum case. Most people know the Texas as an old battleship in a park. Almost nobody knows that she is not just a survivor of one war that happened to be around for another. She was the ship the United States Navy used to try almost everything for the first time. She and her sister New York were the first battleships in the world to carry 14-inch guns. She was the first American battleship to launch an aeroplane from a platform on a turret in 1919. She was among the first American warships to get production radar. She was the first American battleship to mount anti-aircraft guns at all. And she was the first battleship in the United States to become a permanent museum ship in 1948, which is the reason she is still here and her sisters are not. By the end of this video, you will know exactly what she did in both wars, which of her firsts actually mattered and which are trivia, why no other ship in the world holds this record, and what shape she is in today. Before we keep going, thank you for being here, and I want to ask you something genuinely. Where in the world are you watching this from? And have you been aboard the Texas at San Jacinto in the old days or since the move? If you have, tell me the year, because the ship you saw in 1970 is not the ship somebody saw in 2010. Start at the beginning, because the beginning explains the record. The Texas was commissioned on March 10, 1914. She is a New York-class battleship, around 27,000 tons as built, and she was designed at the exact moment when the battleship was the most important object in the world. Her sister ship, USS New York, was commissioned just over a year later on May 15, 1914. To understand her, you have to understand what a dreadnought was. In 1906, the Royal Navy launched HMS Dreadnought, and every battleship on Earth became obsolete overnight, because instead of a mixed battery of different-sized guns, she carried one caliber of big gun in numbers, and she was faster than everything her size. Every Navy had to start again. The Texas is from that generation, and she went one better, 10 14-inch guns, when everybody else's heavy battleships were carrying 12 or 13.5-inch. Texas and New York were the first warships designed to carry 14-inch guns. Both ships, not Texas alone. First in the world. Then, 2 months after commissioning, she was in action. Not in Europe, but at Veracruz in Mexico in a crisis most Americans have never heard of. That is 1914. Now the First War. Here is the thing about American battleships in the First World War that surprises people. They did not fight a fleet action because there was not one to fight after Jutland. The German high seas fleet stayed in harbor. So what the Texas actually did was harder to make into a story and more important than it sounds. She crossed the Atlantic and joined the British Grand Fleet as part of an American squadron in the North Sea. American battleships under British operational command in the worst sea and the worst weather in the world, standing watch on the possibility that the Germans would come out. She escorted convoys. She sat in the North Sea in winter. And in November 1918, she was present when the German fleet came out for the last time to surrender at Scapa Flow, where most of it was later scuttled by its own crews. That is a first war, not a glorious one, a cold, wet, grinding one. Between the wars is where the interesting part happens, and it is the part that almost never gets told because between the wars sounds like nothing happened. The Texas spent those 20 years as a laboratory. On March 10th, 1919, at Guantanamo Bay, they built a platform over a turret, put a British-built Sopwith Camel on it, and flew it off. First American battleship to launch an aircraft. Think about what that means in 1919. The aeroplane is 15 years old. The carrier does not exist yet in any meaningful form, and somebody has just proved a battleship can put a fighter into the air. She was the first American warship to control her guns with directors and range keepers, which sounds like a footnote and is not, because that is the birth of centralized fire control, the idea that one crew high up in the ship aims all the guns instead of each turret aiming for itself. Every warship since works that way. She got anti-aircraft guns before any other American battleship, at a time when a lot of admirals still thought aircraft were a nuisance rather than a threat. And she was among the first American ships to carry production radar in 1939, before the United States was in the war. Now hold those two facts together, because this is the sentence I keep coming back to. This is a ship that carried a Sopwith Camel from the First World War and radar on the same hull within 20 years. That is the reason her record cannot be repeated. She lived through the fastest technological change in the history of naval warfare, and instead of being retired at the start of it, she was the ship they tested it on. So that is how she got to the Second War. Here is what she did in it. The Texas was old by 1942, a 28-year-old coal-era hull in a war of aircraft carriers. She was not going to fight a fleet action either. What she had was 10 big guns and armor, and there was one job in that war that wanted exactly those things: shore bombardment. She covered the North African landings. Then, in June 1944, she was off Normandy. At Pointe du Hoc, she fired on German positions above the cliffs the Rangers were climbing. Later in the campaign, to reach targets further inland, her crew did something that sounds mad and is documented. They deliberately flooded compartments on one side of the ship to make her lean over, because tilting the hull raised the elevation of her guns and gave her a few thousand extra yards of range. They flooded a battleship on purpose, in a battle, to shoot further. Then she went to the other war. She covered the landings at Iwo Jima and at Okinawa on the other side of the world from where she had escorted convoys in 1918. And when the war ended, she carried troops home. The Magic Carpet Run, ships of every kind converted into ferries to bring the American army back across an ocean. 2 world wars, 31 years apart, on one hull. And there is one thing from that summer I did not want to skip, because it is the only place where her 2 wars touch each other directly. On the 25th of June, 1944, the Texas went in against the coastal batteries at Cherbourg. Those were heavy German guns in concrete, and a battleship trading fire with fortified artillery on land is a fight the ship does not automatically win. The fort cannot sink, and the ship can. USS Arkansas and USS Nevada were alongside her in the bombardment. She was hit. One shell struck the navigating bridge and killed the helmsman. Another came into the ship and did not go off, and the men aboard had to deal with an unexploded German shell inside their own hull while the action was still going on. Now hold that next to 1918. The same ship 26 years earlier was standing watch in the North Sea in the cold, waiting for a German fleet that never came out. She spent the first war waiting for the Germans to shoot at her, and she spent the second one being shot at by them from a beach. There is no other ship afloat anywhere in the world that both of those sentences are true about. Now I promised at the start that I would tell you which of her firsts actually mattered and which are trivia, and I want to keep that promise because a list of firsts is the cheapest kind of history, and this ship deserves better. The Sopwith Camel is trivia. It is a wonderful photograph, and it proved a point, but battleships launching fighters off turret platforms was a dead end. Within a few years, the answer was the aircraft carrier, and the flying-off platform disappeared. The 14-inch guns are half trivia. Being first to a caliber matters for about 5 years, until somebody goes bigger, and somebody always does. By the 30s, the standard was 16 inches. The 2 that actually mattered are the boring ones. Centralized fire control, directors and range keepers, one team high in the ship computing the solution for every gun, is the single biggest jump in naval gunnery in the 20th century. Before it, hitting a moving ship at 10 miles from a moving ship was closer to luck than to engineering. After it, it was arithmetic. Every warship afloat today, of every navy, works on the principle the Texas was testing, and radar. She had production radar in 1939, and radar is the reason the Second War at Sea looks nothing like the first. It is why the Washington could sink the Kirishima in the dark, off Guadalcanal, without the Japanese ever seeing her. It ended night as a hiding place. So the honest version of her firsts is not that she did a lot of things first. It is that she was the ship the Navy trusted with the 2 changes that mattered most, and she was already a quarter of a century old when the second one arrived. So why is she the only one? This is where people usually assume she was special, and she was not. She was lucky, and then she was chosen. Plenty of ships fought in both wars. There were dozens: British, American, French, Japanese, Italian, German. Old dreadnoughts kept on for training, for escort, for bombardment, because a hull with armor and guns is still useful even when it is 25 years out of date. The problem is not that she was rare in 1945. The problem is what happened to all of them afterwards. The Washington Naval Treaty of 1922 had already ended construction of new battleships and led to the scrapping of older ships worldwide. The First World War generation of battleships was mostly gone before 1945, obsolete, scrapped under the disarmament treaties of the 20s and 30s, sunk in the Second War, or expended as targets after it. The famous survivors of both wars in other navies, Japanese, German, British, French, were sunk, broken up, or turned into scrap in the decade after the peace. Britain scrapped its entire battle line inside about 15 years, including ships with far more famous names than this one. USS New York, Texas's sister ship, was decommissioned on August 29, 1946, and sunk as a target ship on July 6, 1948, just months after Texas became a museum. The last British battleship went to the breakers in the early 60s. That is the piece people miss. The Texas is not the last one because she outfought anybody. She is the last one because everybody else's country sold theirs, and hers did not. The Texas came out of the war afloat, in one piece and old enough to be finished. In the normal course of events, she would have been sold, and there would be nothing. What saved her was that Texas, the state, got there first in 1948 and did something nobody had done. Took a battleship permanently as a memorial. She is the first United States battleship preserved that way, which means every single museum battleship in America, the North Carolina, the Alabama, the Massachusetts, the Missouri, all of them, is following a path that this ship opened. And I want to say what that actually took in 1948, because on what the state took her makes it sound automatic. It was not. In 1948, nobody in the United States had ever preserved a battleship. There was no model, no organization to copy, no idea what it cost to keep one, and no reason for anybody to believe it was possible. Preserving a warship was not a category that existed. Old warships were sold, and that was the end of the sentence. So a group of Texans had to invent the whole idea. Raise the money, negotiate with the Navy, find somewhere to put her, and convince a state legislature that a 34-year-old battleship was worth a permanent commitment. She was handed over on the 21st of April, 1948, which is San Jacinto Day, the anniversary of the battle that won Texan independence, and moored beside the battleground itself. That decision is the origin point of every battleship museum in America. The North Carolina campaign in 1961, the Alabama campaign in 1964, the Massachusetts, the Missouri, the New Jersey, the Wisconsin, the Iowa, all of them came after, and all of them had something the Texas group did not. Proof that it could be done at all. And I want to be honest about the cost of that, because this channel has covered it and it belongs here. Being first meant being preserved before anybody knew how. She was moored in a narrow artificial slip beside the San Jacinto battleground 40 miles inland, in still fresh water, which is one of the worst environments you can put a steel hull in. In 1968, her rotting teak deck was covered with concrete because concrete was cheaper than wood, and the concrete cracked and let water in. By the mid-80s, naval architects found compartments standing full of water. By the 2010s, crews were pumping thousands of gallons a minute to hold her level. In August 2022, she was towed 40 miles down the Houston Ship Channel to a shipyard in Galveston and lifted out of the water, and she has been out ever since. What has happened there is not cosmetic. They have repaired or replaced something in the order of 700 tons of steel. They rebuilt the underwater parts of her torpedo blisters. They have put her back into her 1945 camouflage. The program is on the order of $75 million, most of it from the state legislature. And the reopening at Pier 15 in Galveston is now aimed at 2027. So the answer to what shape is she in is genuinely strange. She is in better structural condition than she has been in 50 years, and you cannot go aboard her. Here is the last thing, and it is the part that changed how I think about her. There is a temptation to treat the Texas as a relic, the old ship, the first of the museums, the one that keeps needing money. But look at what her record actually is. She is the only ship left that was shot at in both world wars. She launched an airplane before aircraft carriers were a serious idea and carried radar before America entered the Second War. She was the first American battleship preserved, which created the model every other one followed. And the reason she nearly died is not neglect by people who did not care. It is that nobody had ever done this before. And the first attempt at anything is the one that gets it wrong. Every mistake made on the Texas, the freshwater berth, the concrete deck, the deferred hull work, the inland location with no visitors, is a mistake that the museums, which came after her, did not have to make because she made it first. Look at what the ships that followed did differently. The North Carolina sits in a berth at Wilmington on the Cape Fear River and has had a serious, funded program of hull work, including a cofferdam built around her so the hull could be repaired in place. The New Jersey went into a real dry dock in 2024, rather than waiting for the water to make the decision. The Missouri is in salt water at Pearl Harbor, with 1 million visitors a year paying for her upkeep. None of those organizations invented that approach. They learned it, and a good deal of what they learned came from watching what went wrong 40 miles up a channel in Texas. There is a version of this story where that makes the Texas a cautionary tale. I do not think it does. Somebody has to go first. And going first in 1948 meant doing it with no manual, no precedent, and no idea that fresh water eats a hull differently than the sea does. She was the test ship for fire control in 1916, for naval aviation in 1919, for radar in 1939. And then, without anybody planning it, she became the test ship for how a country keeps a battleship. So if you have been aboard her, tell me the year. And if you were there when the deck was still concrete, you were standing on the reason all of this happened.